only because I had to quit my work due to a serious vehicle accident the week before my 18th birthday, did I live in the same family home until I was 19. I've always known that I wanted to leave our house as quickly as possible. What I saw and experienced there were horrors that no one should ever have to endure. I wouldn't want my worst enemies to experience the atrocities of my family home. Years passed as I tried to forget what had occurred to me in that house. I tried therapy for a while, but every therapist I saw believed that my underlying trauma was the reason I was making things up. One person firmly believed that I was possessed and recommended an exorcism. I wish they were aware that we had already attempted that when I was 7 years old. After the 5th therapist, I gave up and came to terms with the truth that no one could assist me. I initially took the simple route. I made the decision not to give it any thought. I was going to carry on with my life, as if nothing had occurred. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac seemed as though I had never lived there. For a time, at least, it was effective. But the nightmares soon followed. They were really normal at first. In my bad dreams, I was being chased down a long hallway, and no matter how quickly I raced, I was unable to get to the well-lit room at the end of the hall. Each time, I woke up breathless and drenched in perspiration, as though I had been there, fleeing some invisible threat. It was difficult to determine whether the anxiety I was feeling in this dream was something I was truly experiencing because it was so real. I also experienced a recurrent nightmare in which a shadowy entity tried to approach me from behind. For some reason, I was 10 in this dream, and as I went about my day, I kept seeing a big, menacing black figure in the background. Until I looked back and saw nothing there, it would creep closer and closer. I became increasingly sidetracked by TV, coloring books, and the enormous zoo animal floor puzzle that I used to be completely enamored with as the nightmare day went on. The creature would go unnoticed until it was directly beside me. I understood somehow that I had to remain vigilant. I was aware that the monster, whatever it was, would grab me if I didn't pay enough attention. Every time I realized that I was overly preoccupied with something, my heart would pound in my chest, making it difficult for me to breathe while I tried to determine whether or not that thing had yet to affect me. Like every other nightmare, this one ended the same way the figure reached me because I became a bit too absorbed in whatever show I was watching. It wasn't until it managed to totally enclose my face with its big hands, preventing me from seeing, breathing, or yelling that I realized it was behind me. My lungs would be burning for air when I woke up from this one. Until I could control my breathing and bring my pulse rate back to normal, I would take enormous breaths. Every time I wake up, I feel as though I'm dying since every dream I have is a horror. I quickly came to the conclusion that I would not benefit from disregarding what I had actually seen. This is my new strategy as a result. I'm hoping that by talking about all the atrocities I experienced in that place, I'll be able to let them go and perhaps have some peace of mind. All I can hope is that I don't disturb your tranquility in the process of finding mine. The bedroom of Grandma. My grandmother's former bedroom was one of the more subdued features of my family's home. Because the house was so big, roughly twice as big as any other on the street, there were a lot of empty rooms. The prohibition on entering another person's room, whether or not they were alive, was one of the more significant regulations. The easiest bedroom to enter covertly was Grandma's old one. In every other room, you had to pick a lock or find the keys, which were scattered throughout the house. But Grandma's room was always open. I occasionally woke up in the middle of the night and went to the kitchen for a glass of water after walking down the hallway toward the staircase. On a couple of those evenings, when I woke up, Grandma's room door was ajar and the gentle light was streaming into the hallway. Soft piano music occasionally emanated from the interior of the space. No matter the hour, I would dash into the bedroom as soon as I noticed the door was open, forgetting the dryness in my throat. Grandma's porcelain figurines would all be dancing on the big oak bookcase inside. The assortment of little rabbits would leap over the shelf and dart among themselves, their bodies pounding softly against the wood. My gaze would dart between the porcelain rabbits and the porcelain kids who would dance to the music while I stood in front of the shelves for hours on end. The sounds didn't bother or occur to me as an 8-year-old, but now that I think about it, there wasn't a piano or stereo of any type in that room, and I'm not entirely sure where they originated from. I was always caught in the room by someone. Every time I would awaken from my reverie, I would be dragged from the room by an adult. There was also some yelling, some swearing, and the occasional slap on the back of the head, depending on who it was. I never realized what the room's drawback was, and as I grew older, its allure diminished. I didn't understand why people respond so strongly when they see me in that room until I was 12 years old. I was waiting for my favorite cartoon to start on a Saturday morning while eating a bowl of cereal in the living room. My Aunt Chelsea passed in front of the television 3 times while I was sitting there shoving spoonfuls of delicious, colorful cereal into my mouth. She eventually came to a stop in front of it, obstructing my entire field of vision, and leaned forward until we were eye level. "Kira, are you listening?" she inquired. I blinked at her, perplexed, as I hadn't been paying attention. She let out a sigh. "Have you seen Peter?" I asked. "Are you aware whether he accompanied your mother to the grocery store?" "No," I shook my head. In retrospect, it seemed strange that I hadn't seen Peter at all that morning. Furthermore, I was uncertain as to whether he had left the house. I had spent much more time watching cartoons. In summary, Peter had not accompanied my mother to the grocery store. He was discovered in Grandma's bedroom. The door was closed this time, which is why no one had checked. Later in the morning, my mom and my Aunt Chelsea eventually became concerned and started searching into every bedroom. At that point, they discovered Peter, who had starved to death and quickly became dehydrated. He sat in front of the wooden shelves, watching the figurines dance to the music, his bony, dry face locked in the same smile. The portrait of the family. The enormous painting that my grandfather had painted was one of the house's scariest features. He, my mother, my grandmother, my Aunt Chelsea, and my infant Uncle Roland were all part of it. Uncle Roland, dressed only in diapers, knit baby booties, and a matching cap, was being held by my grandmother while she sat in a big, padded recliner. My grandfather was standing to her left, wearing a neatly ironed black button-up shirt and a black cowboy hat that cast a sharp shadow over half of his face. Aunt Chelsea was standing next to him. She had on a dress with a pink strawberry design and was wearing bright white shoes. The frilly pink socks she wore were uneven, with one pushed up a couple of inches higher than the other, and the buckle on her left shoe was broken. My mother, wearing patched overalls and a pair of filthy sneakers and a white top, was the only one smiling in the picture. She flashed her lost front tooth in a broad smile. At first look, this family portrait appeared to be quite typical. But every time the sun started to set, the orange glow from outside would illuminate the painting, illuminating every inch of Grandpa's face, including the area that was typically hidden by the hat's shadow. Right now, I would stay out of the living room. I always had nightmares about the half of Grandpa's face that was newly lit. It was rotting and discolored, and worms and flies were scuttling in and out of the holes around his cheekbones. He had a blazing red eye, and all the muscles in his jaw were evident. What caused this is still a mystery to me. However, Yuri, a cousin, once claimed to believe the painter was a demon. In light of what I've seen, I lean toward believing her. The grave of Grandpa. Although I was present for the most of the events leading up to the aftermath, I did not personally witness this. A few years after Roland's birth, my grandfather passed away. It was discovered that he had developed cancer, but it was already too late to take any action. His tomb is situated in the very rear of the property, where my grandma had chosen to bury him. Since no one is permitted to visit the burial, it was concealed by a lot of overgrown weeds and vegetation. Uncle Roland suddenly developed an obsession with the idea that his father's body had been rotting in the backyard when I was 13. He would not stop talking about it, and even asserted that he had nightmares in which his father spoke to him. Despite their best efforts, my mom and Aunt Chelsea were unable to soothe him. His fascination with the backyard burial was unbreakable. I recall going out there once to follow him. How he didn't hear me stomping through the dead branches as I followed him to the grave is still a mystery to me. Uncle Roland circled the gravestone several times while I hid behind a shrub and peered behind it. I recall seeing the engraving when I looked at it. Albert C. Trinity is buried here. Fatherly love. We shall always miss you. I heard Roland murmuring to himself. I nearly got up and started to walk back to the home since it was so silent. Roland then let out a startled yell, followed by a gulp. He was staring at the tombstone when I returned my focus to him. To make sure I was seeing everything correctly, I glanced as well and blinked a few times. "Now," the engraving said, Albert C. "Trinity is buried here. Leave me alone. Roland, I'm still alive." I read the words repeatedly as I gazed at them. Uncle Roland got on his knees and pressed his fingertips into the earth. "Dad? Is that you?" He sobbed. I turned to look at the gravestone, which now said Albert C. "Trinity is buried here." "Yes, I am, without a doubt. Now get me out." Roland began to cry at this time. He tried to talk through the tears, but he was a blubbering mess. I saw him start digging wildly and tugging at the grass. He jumped up and sprinted straight by me after realizing that he couldn't dig more than a few inches with just his bare hands. I got up and went to the tombstone as soon as he was out of sight. Once again, the etching was altered. Albert C. "Trinity is buried here. I'll be free soon. We'll be together again soon." Roland was in the shed when I dashed back toward the house. I paused on the back porch and saw Roland return to the cemetery while carrying a shovel.